Lust. Lust is the sin that can turn a perfectly rational human into a love-struck puppy chasing after every shiny object or person that catches their eye. In the grand scheme of hell's hierarchy, lust is like that annoying itch you can never quite scratch. And if this itch follows you into the afterlife, terrible things are in store for you. In this divine comedy, Dante places the lustful in the second circle of hell. They're punished by being swept up in an eternal windstorm, tossed around like leaves in a Category 5 hurricane. It's poetic justice at its finest. The very passions that made the lustful spin out of control in life now have them literally spinning in the afterlife. Imagine being caught in a never-ending roller coaster ride, but instead of fun, there's just endless nausea and regret. So the punishment for lust in hell is basically a cosmic "told you so" from the universe. You spent your life chasing after desires, and now those desires have turned into eternal torment. But let's say your soul's not doomed for the fiery depths, just a little too spicy for heaven right away. In that case, you'll have to make a temporary pit stop at purgatory to be cleansed of your sin. Those guilty of lust must walk through literal flames to purify themselves, where the flames symbolize the consuming nature of uncontrolled desires and lustful thoughts. It's like the universe's version of a detox, but instead of green juice, it's fire. The good news is your sins have now been washed and you're free to enter the pearly gates. Gluttony. You're at an all-you-can-eat buffet, and the options are endless. You've got a plate piled high with everything from cheesy pasta to desserts, and you start eating like there's no tomorrow. Sure, you feel full, but there's still so much more food left to try. Fast forward to later, and you're lying on the couch, clutching your belly like you've swallowed a bowling ball, questioning every life choice that led to that fifth helping. Now imagine being this overindulgent in everything you do in life, but instead of a comfy couch, you land a permanent spot in hell, where your love for excess turns into a buffet of nightmares. Back in medieval times, folks believed that gluttons in hell would be force-fed a diet of rats, toads, and snakes, a sort of infernal fear factor. Dante, however, paints a different kind of picture. These extreme overeaters have been condemned to the third circle of hell, where they're stuck in a vile slush made by never-ending cold and foul rain. Think of it as being trapped in the world's grossest food fight, except instead of food, you're wading through a slushy mixture of filth and regret with no exit in sight. And if that wasn't bad enough, there's also a three-headed dog who is here to constantly gnaw and chew on your soul like it's his favorite squeaky toy. He is an embodiment of the insatiable hunger that drove you to this point. However, if you're lucky enough to land in purgatory, your fate is slightly different, but no less torturous. You'll be starved and surrounded by the smell of delicious fruit that's forever just out of reach. It's like wandering through an eternal farmer's market where the peaches are perfect, but you can't really buy anything. So in hell, gluttony isn't just about the food, it's about the never-ending cycle of craving and disgust. Greed. If you're the type who's constantly chasing after the good things in life, so much so that you don't mind stepping on a few toes, or even whole people to get what you want, then you might just be a bit too greedy. In Christian teachings, greed, or avarice, is that never-ending craving for wealth or possessions that makes you feel like you've got a black hole where your wallet should be. The Bible is pretty clear that loving money too much is like setting your GPS straight to a miserable afterlife. In Inferno, Dante gives you a front row seat to the punishment for greed. The greedy, along with the prodigal, who have wasted their wealth, are tossed into the fourth circle of hell. Here, they're condemned to push giant boulders back and forth, crashing into each other for all eternity, like some sort of demonic bumper cars. Picture a never-ending game of rock, paper, scissors, except it's just big, heavy rocks, and there's no winning, just eternal torment. The massive boulders represent the material possessions that dominated these people's lives, while their circular movement depicts the pointlessness of their obsession with wealth. Meanwhile, in Purgatorio, the greedy are punished by being bound and lying face down on the ground, unable to move. They're forced to reflect on their obsession with earthly riches, literally being stuck looking at the ground. It's like being glued to the floor at a luxury store, surrounded by all the things you once coveted but can't reach anymore. And it's not just about the physical weight or immobility. The real kicker is the endless regret and frustration that comes with these punishments. In hell, the greedy are forever haunted by the realization that their pursuit of wealth was as futile as trying to fill a bottomless pit. Sloth. You constantly find yourself snoozing the alarm again and again in the morning. It's the same drill every day. The idea of getting up feels like climbing Everest in flip-flops. So you sink deeper into the blankets, thinking you'll just for 5 more minutes. The next thing you know, half the day is gone and all you've accomplished is a masterclass in procrastination. That's sloth for you, the tempting allure of, I'll do it later. Until later turns into never. When sloth takes control of your body, it's a slippery slope to apathy and spiritual decay. You start neglecting your spiritual duties, and before long, you're calling for divine intervention, but not the good kind. Well, lucky for you, purgatory has just the workout regimen to get you back in shape. It's the kind of activity that makes you wish you'd been more proactive in life. The slothful souls are condemned to race around the mountain of purgatory like they're late for the world's most important meeting. The irony is that there's no finish line, so you just keep on running uphill for eternity. This is to make up for all the time you wasted doing nothing. It's the cosmic equivalent of being stuck on a treadmill forever, all because you couldn't be bothered to get moving when it actually mattered. But this eternal jog will feel like a stroll in the park compared to what's in store for the really lazy folks down in hell. These souls are part of the fifth circle, where they're stuck in the swampy, dark waters of the river Styx, depicting their lack of clarity in life. Here, they are perpetually submerged in the murky depths, unable to form coherent words as their voices bubble up in the mud. This illustrates their inability to take any kind of meaningful action to change their lives. It's basically a live-action replay of the life they've lived, trapped in a stagnant, suffocating bog with no way out. Wrath! Imagine you're stuck in traffic and some driver cuts you off without even a glance in your direction. Your blood starts to boil, your grip tightens on the steering wheel, and suddenly you're fantasizing about turning your car into a battering ram. That surge of anger is basically wrath trying to convince you to do something that you would later regret. And if wrath becomes your go-to reaction whenever something bad happens, then you're probably paving your way to some pretty unpleasant afterlife accommodations. The punishments for wrath and sloth are interrelated to each other. Just like the sloths, the wrathful are condemned to the fifth circle of hell, but unlike the sloths who get to lurk beneath the murky waters, the wrathful are stuck on the surface. But they're not just floating around peacefully like rubber ducks in a bathtub. Instead, they're locked in a never-ending brawl, tearing each other apart in a chaotic, eternal rage. It's like being in Fight Club, except you can't escape, and everyone around you is just as angry as you are. The eternal boxing match represents their uncontrollable anger in life. The situation in purgatory isn't any smoother either, as the resentful are surrounded by thick, blinding smoke that chokes them and blocks their sight. It's disorienting, suffocating, and frustrating. It's like being stuck in a foggy maze where every wrong turn reminds you that letting anger cloud your judgment wasn't a good idea. Envy. Imagine you're scrolling through social media and you see someone's vacation photos from an exotic island, complete with sunsets and fancy cocktails. You feel that familiar twinge of envy. It's like a mosquito bite you just can't ignore. Suddenly, your own life feels dull, and you're left wondering why they get all the good stuff while you're stuck in your boring old life. Envy is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. But Dante views envy as a deadly sin that can be scrubbed off in purgatory, as opposed to something that would condemn you eternally to hell. The envious are condemned to wear cloaks made of lead that weigh them down, forcing them to shuffle around while their eyes are sewn shut with wire. This is because envy is all about what you see but don't have. You wanted what someone else had so badly that it turned into a burden you can't shake off. And what's more interesting is that the envious are also rehabilitated in a disturbing sort of way. They are forced to hear voices reminding them of the virtue of generosity, which is the very opposite of their envious nature. Think of it as being stuck in a self-help seminar you never signed up for, where the message is clear. Stop comparing, start caring, even if it's a bit late. So the envious are left to stew in the very feelings that landed them in this mess, in a state of perpetual longing and regret up until their sins are washed away and they finally have a chance at heaven. Pride. Picture this, you've just aced your big presentation at work and everyone's showering you with compliments. You feel like you've just single-handedly saved the company, and you're thinking, honestly, how do these people even function without me? That little voice in your head is pride talking. It's the sin that got Lucifer booted out of heaven, and it's been leading people into trouble ever since. Pride is like the valedictorian of the deadly sins. It's got the most clout and is punished in both hell and purgatory. The most boastful of all sinners will end up in hell, where their egos are eternally roasted on a spit. But if you're only moderately full of yourself, you get the scenic route, which is purgatory. Here, the prideful are disciplined on the first terrace of Mount Purgatory. They are weighed down by massive boulders strapped to their backs, forcing them to bend low to the ground as they hike up the mountain. This represents the massive weight of their pride that made them a little too arrogant in life, so you're literally being flattened like a pancake by your own overinflated ego. Neglect, indifference. You're at a big family gathering and someone asks you to help with the dishes. You shrug and think, someone else will handle it, and promptly go back to watching my videos like it's your full-time job. But this attitude isn't just limited to dishes. You feel like this about almost everything, no matter how concerning it is. Well, that's indifference, essentially choosing to be a passive observer in a world full of problems that you could but won't address. Indifference is closely tied to the sin of spiritual laziness. It's the art of dodging all moral obligations with the grace of a cat avoiding a bath. And much like other sins, this attitude comes with a hefty price tag that extends far beyond this life. The punishment for being indifferent or neutral is vividly just like the sin itself, lacking any direction. The souls of the indifferent are condemned to the vestibule of hell. They will eternally run after a blank banner like a dog chasing its own tail, except there's no tail, only meaningless running. And all this while being stung by swarms of insects and chased by maggots. It's like they've been doomed to forever sit on the fence. This punishment basically reflects their lack of commitment to any cause or belief. It's like the universe's way of saying, you couldn't be bothered to make a choice in life, so here's a little non-directional workout for you. A similar fate will await the souls who delayed repentance till the end of their lives, because they were too cozy to make that decision earlier on. But these negligent individuals would instead be placed in anti-purgatory, so they might be able to see the Lord's shade after they've done their time. Hypocrisy. You're at a party and someone is loudly singing praises of the virtues of healthy eating, all while sneaking bites of a gooey chocolate cake behind his back. So his actions are completely opposite to what he's teaching. Now that's hypocrisy, talking the talk while secretly walking the walk in the opposite direction. In a religious sense, hypocrisy is all about presenting a facade of virtue while secretly binging on vice. Dante visualizes a particularly fitting punishment for hypocrites in Inferno. Their souls are doomed to walk eternally under heavy lead cloaks that are painted golden on the outside. Imagine walking around in what looks like a swanky golden robe that screams, "I'm fabulous!" except it weighs about as much as a cement truck and feels like wearing a suit made of anvils. These robes are designed to look impressive, but wearing one is about as comfortable as trying to nap on a bed of nails, representing the false appearances that hypocrites put on to deceive others. Plus, these hypocrites are forced to walk at a slow, agonizing pace, which symbolizes that their deceptive lives were ultimately a slow march toward their downfall. It's the most uncomfortable costume party you'll ever visit if you don't put off that mask of hypocrisy you've been carrying around. Blasphemy! You're at a family dinner and Uncle Bob starts ranting about everything and anything, disrespecting everyone's beliefs and values with a loud, obnoxious monologue. His outburst isn't just annoying, it's deeply offensive to the beliefs of those around him. Well, it's more than likely that he's committing some sort of blasphemy at this point. Blasphemy is considered a grave sin. It's the act of showing utter contempt for God or sacred things. The Bible doesn't pull back on this one, especially when it comes to blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, which is basically the spiritual equivalent of crossing a line that's been drawn in stone. Dante tosses blasphemers in a particularly fiery predicament. They're thrown into the ninth circle, where they're forced to lie on a bed of burning sand under a never-ending rain of fire. Imagine a hot day at the beach with no sunscreen, and the sand is so blistering hot that it feels like you're roasting on a pizza stone. To make matters worse, the sky decides to join in on the fun by pelting you with fiery raindrops. The blasphemers themselves are burned by the flames, but it's the scorching sand that truly embodies their sin. Their harsh and irreverent words in life are now matched by an environment that's as relentless as their disrespect. It's the ultimate you reap what you sow scenario, where their disdain for the divine is met with a literal and metaphorical inferno. Treachery. You're at a high-stakes poker game with your closest friends. Everyone's all in, and you've got a hand that could win the pot. But just as you're about to reveal your cards, your best friend pulls a fast one and swaps your cards when you're not looking. The room erupts in laughter as you lose all your money, but your heart drops when you realize you've been played like a fiddle. That's treachery, the kind of move that makes you wonder if they were ever really on your side. It is seen as one of the most heinous sins, as it undermines the very essence of trust and loyalty. It's no wonder, then, that traitors are dealt the coldest hand in all of hell. They're condemned to the ninth circle, in a frozen lake called Cocytus. Here they are encased in ice, up to their necks, or even their faces, depending on just how much of a cheating snake they were. Picture this, as if you're stuck in a block of ice, unable to move a muscle. It's like being a human popsicle with only your face exposed while a cold wind howls around you. The ice symbolizes the cold, unfeeling nature of betrayal, the emotional deep freeze that happens when someone you trusted stabs you in the back. So every time the betrayed souls try to move or speak, they're met with a cruel bite of the ice, a constant reminder of their treachery. It's as if the universe is saying, you wanted to be cool and betray trust? Well, now you're the coolest thing in hell. Seduction. So imagine you're on a date and things are going smoothly, but then out of nowhere, your date starts hitting you with cheesy remarks and over-the-top praise that feels like you accidentally walked into a rom-com audition. You cringe but play along, only to find out later that their sweet talk was just a ploy to get you to pay the bill, and nothing more. That's seduction in a nutshell, a sugar-coated manipulation that leaves you feeling a bit duped and annoyed. It's like wrapping a fish in glitter paper. Looks good on the outside, but is a smelly mess once you unwrap it. Those who made a career out of seducing and flattering their way through life will find themselves in quite the awkward position in hell. These smooth talkers are banished to the eighth circle, where they are condemned to march in circles like a flock of sheep, constantly getting whipped by demonic supervisors who take their jobs way too seriously. Each lash they get is a particularly stinging reminder of the harm they caused to the people they charmed in life. It's like the universe is giving them the ultimate payback for all the hearts they toyed with. While the endless circling is symbolic of the endless loops of deceit these seducers spun in life, there's no straight path, no way out, just a repetitive, dizzying cycle of their own making. Picture the world's worst merry-go-round, except the only prize you're winning is eternal regret and pain.